Welcome YouTubers to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In this video, there are going to be 76 practice test questions that should fully prepare you and closely mirror the arithmetic reasoning subtest of the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, that is the ASVAB, as well as a pre-screening internet-delivered computer adaptive test, that is the PiCAT. More specifically, I always encourage you to pause the question before I read it, attempt to work out the question on your own, and then resume playing the video to check your solution. As a reminder, on the ASVAB and PiCAT, you're not permitted to use a calculator or a reference sheet. So as you work through these practice test questions, try not to use any of those resources. Similarly, I want to mention this. If you can answer 80% or more of these questions correctly on your own, I would consider that outstanding, and you're almost certainly ready to go take this test already. Similarly, if you answer 70 to 79% of these questions correctly on your own, I would consider that very good, and you are probably ready to take this test right now. On the other hand, if you only answered 60 to 69% of these questions correctly, I would consider that average. While you'll probably pass the test, I would strongly encourage you to spend a few weeks studying before you actually go and take this test. Finally, if you answered 59% or fewer of these questions correctly, you need to make some significant improvements, which means you probably need to spend a month or more getting ready for this test. Finally, I want to address something that's come up in the comments recently. Some people have asked whether my content that's a year old or so is still relevant. And in response, I want to say this. My older content is absolutely relevant. And how do I know that? Some tutoring groups, who I'm not going to mention by name, have copied all of my older videos and are remaking them in an effort to convince you to pay for tutoring. Please do not fall for that. If you sign up for tutoring and you notice that the tutor's questions are almost identical to mine, please ask for a refund. It took a significant amount of time and effort to create my older content, and clearly other tutors find it so valuable as to include it in their current content. So again, ask for a refund if you ever pay for tutoring and they're using my older free content. Finally, I want to say this. There are two ways you can become a part of my mission to help people get access to test prep content for free. If you found my content helpful, you can go to my store, which is on my YouTube channel, and buy some merch like a t-shirt or a hat. Or you could even become a member on YouTube by clicking the join button. That costs $4.99 a month, and you can quit at any time. So all that finally being said, let's get started with this first practice test question. Admittedly, this first practice test question is the most difficult practice test question in this video. This first practice test question says a train goes twice as fast downhill as it can go uphill, and 2/3 as fast uphill as it can go on level ground. If it goes 120 miles per hour downhill, how long will it take to travel 45 miles on flat land? So you should recognize that this question has all the elements of the distance formula, that is d equals r times t, distance equals rate times time. Specifically, we're talking about the train as it travels across level ground. We're told, according to the problem, it travels a distance of 45 miles. We don't know how fast or what its rate is, and we want to know how long it's going to take or how much time, t, it's going to take to travel that 45 miles. So in other words, we got to calculate rate somehow to solve for t. And the way we're going to do that is using this information about how the train travels uphill, downhill, and on level ground. So let's go ahead and write U for uphill, D for downhill, and L for level ground. Well, according to this problem, it goes 120 miles per hour downhill. So for downhill, I'm going to put 120 miles per hour. Likewise, it says right here, a train goes twice as fast downhill as it can go uphill. In other words, if it goes 120 miles per hour downhill, that means it goes 60 miles per hour uphill. Again, 120 divided by 2 is 60. Finally, this question says this in regard to uphill and level ground. It says it goes 2/3 as fast uphill as it can go on level ground. So in other words, 60 miles per hour is equal to 2/3 of the rate that the train travels across level ground. If we solve this for r, we'll be able to plug it in over here and get our answer. So I'm going to rewrite this with a space here. so I can do so I can solve this one. Again, to get rid of this 2/3 in front of this r, we're going to multiply it by its reciprocal, notably by 3/2. And we're going to do that to both sides here. This crosses out here and here, leaving you with r on this side. Again, write 60 as a fraction by placing it over 1. So we can cross reduce. 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into 60 30 times. So this is 30 over 1 times 3 over 1, which is 30 times 3. 30 times 3 is 90. So now we know that the train goes 90 miles per hour across level ground. Now to solve for t, all we have to do is divide both sides by 90, of course. In doing so, this crosses out over here, leaving you with t on this side. Let's reduce 45 over 90 off to the side like this. 45 and 90 have a common factor of 45. 45 divided by 45 is 1. 90 divided by 45 is going to be 2. So in other words, it's going to take the train A half an hour to travel 45 miles on flat land. For this ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we know 1/6 of the students are in 5th grade, 1/3 are in 4th grade, and a quarter of the remaining students are in 2nd grade. Let's first figure out how many students are in 4th and 5th grade. Just add 1/6 and 1/3. If you can't do that, mentally go ahead and find a common denominator, which is 6. This is 3 over 6, which reduces to 1/2. So 1/2 of the students are in 4th or 5th grade, which means 1/2 of the students are in some other grade. So let's figure out what 1/2 of 96 is. Again, if you can't do that mentally, just multiply straight across. It's 96 over 2, which becomes 48. So 48 of the students are in some other grade apart from 4th and 5th. Now we know that a quarter of those students are in 2nd grade. So this becomes 48 over 4, which is 12. So 12 of the students are in 2nd grade A. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we're comparing the sales of puppies with the sales of kittens using a ratio. Of course, if you read through the problem, you'll figure out that 4 puppies were sold that cost $104 each, and we're comparing that with the 4 kittens that were sold that cost $24 each. First thing I want to do is reduce this by a common factor of 4. This becomes 104 to 24. Reduce this by a common factor of 2 to make it a little bit easier. This becomes 12. This becomes 52. Again, common factor of 2. We can reduce this by a common factor of 2. This is 6. This is going to be 26. Common factor of 2 one more time. This becomes 3. This becomes 13. So the ratio of sales to puppies to kittens is A, 13 to 3. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question says, what is the volume of a shoebox that has a length of 8 inches, a width of 6 inches, and a height of 5.5 inches? So we're going to be finding the volume of a rectangular prism. That's volume equals length times width times height. Of course, we know these values. That's 8 times 6 times 5.5. 8 times 6 is 48 times 5.5. Let's keep working this out like this. I'm going to write 48 as 48 over 1. I'm going to convert this to an improper fraction. 5 times 2 is 10 plus 1 is 11. So this is 11 over 2. Let's cross reduce. 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into 4 two times. 2 goes into 8 four times. This is 24 times 11. Let's work that off to the side. 24 times 11. 4 times 1 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2. 0 placeholder for 2. Add 4, 6, 2. C. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, trying to figure out how many floorboards, which are 2¼ inches wide each, are needed to cover an area or a floor that is 15 feet wide. So the first thing we have to do is convert our 15 feet to be in terms of inches. There's 12 inches in 1 foot. 15 times 12 is 180. Now this becomes 180 inches divided by 2¼ Let's convert 2¼ to an improper fraction so we can do this. That's 4 times 2, 8 plus 1 is 9. So this is 9 over 4. Now we're dividing with fractions. So follow the algorithm, keep, change, flip. We're going to keep 180 the same, but I'm going to place it over 1 to make it a fraction. We're going to change from division to multiplication. Then we're going to flip this to be 4 over 9. Cross reduce, 9 goes into 9 one time. 9 goes into 18 two times, so it goes into 180 20 times. 20 over 1 is 20. 4 over 1 is 4. 20 times 4 is 80, so you're going to need D, 84 boards. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this. Rachel ran a half a mile in 4 minutes. At this rate, how many miles can she run in 15 minutes? So we're going to use a proportion. We know she runs a half a mile in 4 minutes. We want to know how many miles she can run in 15 minutes. Let's solve this one via cross multiplication. This comes 4x equals uh, 1 half times 15 is going to be 15 over 2. All right, let's divide both sides by 4 now to get x by itself. This crosses out. Now we're actually dividing two fractions here. I can write 4 as a fraction by placing it over 1. When you divide two fractions, you follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. This becomes 15 over 2 times 1 over 4, which is the same thing as 15 over 8. Let's convert that to a mixed number. That's going to be 1. 8 goes into 15 one time with 7/8 remaining. So the answer to this one is A, 1 and 7/8. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says the weight of two cars can be expressed as a ratio of 2 to 3. If the lighter car weighs 1,200 pounds, how much does the heavier car weigh? So this one basically tells you to use a ratio to solve it. Again, we know the car weights have a ratio of 2 to 3. Likewise, we know that the lighter car weighs 1,200 pounds and the weight of the heavier car is unknown, so we could represent that with the letter variable x. For ratios and proportions, you solve them via cross multiplication. This becomes 2 times x equals, well, let's do this mentally. 3 times 1,200. Well, 3 times 12 is 36. Just bring down those two zeros. Divide both sides by 2 now to get x by itself. Uh, you should know that 36 divided by 2 is 18, and just bring down those two zeros. So the answer to this one is D. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're trying to figure out how much farther one car travels than another car if they both start at the same point, travel the same route, albeit at different speeds. So for this one, we're going to need two iterations of distance formula. We know this first car travels at a rate of 40 miles per hour for 5 hours. 40 times 5 is 200, so it traveled 200 miles. The second car, according to the problem, traveled at 55 miles per hour. Again, it went for 5 hours. If you can't do this mentally, do it off to the side like this very quickly. This is going to be 25, so bring down 5, carry 2, 25, 27. So this car went 275 miles. Question is, how much farther did car 2 travel than car 1? Clearly, that's going to be 275 minus 200 or 75. So the answer to this one is D, 75 miles. This math knowledge practice test question says this 21 is 75% of what number? Let's go ahead and solve this one by writing this as an equation that we can then solve. This says 21 in math is equal, so this is equal. 75% can be written as the decimal 0.75 or the fraction 3/4. I'm going to use the fraction 3/4. Of in math is multiply. What number is unknown, so we'll call that n. Let's go ahead and simplify this. This becomes 21 3/4 n. We want to get rid of this 3/4 in front of n, so we'll have our answer. To do that, we're going to multiply both sides of this equation by its reciprocal, notably by 4 over 3. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving us with n. And what do we have right here? We have 4 over 3 times 21. This is very easy to work out. 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 21 7 times. 4 times 7 is 28. So the correct answer to this one is C, 28. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB says this. A flagpole casts a shadow that is 25 feet long. Nearby, a 6-foot tree casts a shadow that is 3 feet long. What is the height of the flagpole? So we have to assume, given that these two things are next to each other, that their heights and lengths of their shadows are going to be proportional. In other words, we can use a proportion to solve this one. Let's start with the tree. We know the tree is 6 feet tall and it casts a 3-foot long shadow. We don't know the height of the flagpole, so put an X there to represent that unknown value. But we know its shadow is 25 feet long. Now that we have this proportion, we just use cross multiplication to solve it. 3 times X is 3X. 6 times 25 is 150. Divide both sides by 3 to get x by itself. X equals 50. All right, so in other words, the flagpole is 50 feet tall. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question says this. Jimmy is painting stripes on one of the walls of his son's bedroom. If he paints stripes that are 20 inches wide and the wall is 15 feet long, how many stripes can he paint on the wall? So for this one, we're going to do 15 feet. That is the length of the wall divided by 20 inches. That is the width of each of the stripes. To proceed, we have to convert these to be in the same units. So I'm going to convert 15 feet to be in terms of inches. There are 12 inches in every foot. So by doing 15 times 12, you'll figure out that conversion. This mental math is very easy to do. 10 times 12 is 120. 5 times 12 is 60. 120 plus 60 is 180. So this becomes 180 inches over 20 inches. Again, those units cross out. These corresponding zeros cross out. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So in other words, he can paint C 9 stripes across the wall. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: a printing press will print 6,000 copies in 20 minutes. A second press will print 15,000 copies in 60 minutes. How many more copies per minute will the faster press print than the slower press? So one goes 6,000 copies in 20 minutes. The other one does 15,000 in 60 minutes. We got to compare their rates per minute. So let's reduce these. 600 divided by 2 is 300. This one prints 300 copies per minute. Cross out these corresponding zeros. This is 1500 divided by 6. If you can't do that mentally, do it off to the side. It's going to be 2, 3, 0, 0. So this one does 250 copies per minute. How much faster is this one than this one? That's 300 minus 250, which is going to be 50. In other words, the faster one can do 50 more copies per minute than the slower one. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're trying to figure out how much James makes if he works 40 hours of regular time, 10 hours of overtime if he makes $12 per hour for regular time, and time and a half for overtime. So let's do 40 times 12 to figure out how much he gets paid for regular time. Again, you should be able to do this mentally. 4 times 12 is 48. Therefore, 40 times 12 is going to be 480. If he makes $12 an hour for regular time, how much does he make for time and a half? Well, what is half of 12? That is 6. So time and a half, he makes $12 an hour plus 6. That's the half there is 18. He worked 10 hours of overtime at a time and a half rate. 18 times 10 is 180. Now we just add these up to get our final answer here. 0, 16, carry a 1, 4, 5, 6. So he makes 660 if he works 40 hours and 10 hours of overtime. This practice test question for the arithmetic reasoning subtest of the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: if you can choose from 3 different shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and 5 pairs of shoes, how many different outfit combinations can you make? So, this question is testing your understanding of the fundamental counting principle, which says this: if you have n number of ways to do one thing and m number of ways to do the other thing, then you have n times m number of ways to do those things together. The same principle applies here. We have 3 different shirts from which we can choose, times 2 different pairs of pants that we can choose, times 5 different pairs of shoes. By multiplying these together, we'll know how many different outfit combinations we can make. Uh, Again, 3 times 2 is going to be 6, so this is 6 times 5. 6 times 5 is 30. So you can make 30 different outfit combinations from these different choices. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says a family wants to arrive at the airport at 1:10 a.m. If it takes 45 minutes to drive to the airport and 30 minutes to get ready to leave, what time should the family wake up? So we're going to work backwards. They want to get there at 1:10 a.m. It takes them 30 minutes to get ready to leave. So let's go back 30 minutes from 1:10. That's going to be 12:40 a.m. So we just subtracted our 30 minutes out. Now, all we have to do is subtract out our 45 minutes. Now, it might be easier to do it this way. Let's subtract 40 from 12:40 a.m. We subtract 40, that takes us right to 12 a.m. And then we have those 5 more minutes to go. 12 a.m. minus 5 minutes is 11:55 p.m., which is answer choice A in this case. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're comparing the volume of 2 boxes. So we're going to need 2 iterations of the volume formula for a rectangular prism. We know the dimensions of this first box. It's 10 by 10 by 4, which is 400. Likewise, we know the volume of the second box is twice the volume of the first box. 400 times 2 is 800. We don't know its length. We know its width is going to be 10 and its height is 5. Let's multiply this out. This becomes 800 equals length times 50. Divide both sides by 50 to get length by itself. This crosses out. Cross out these corresponding zeros. This is 80 divided by 5. Can't do that mentally. Do the long division. 5 goes into 8 one time without going over. 8 minus 5 is 3. Drop down this 0. 5 times 6 is 30. No remainder. So the length is C 16 units. For this ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we're going to translate it into a one-step equation that we're then going to solve. It says 540 is in math is always equal. 150% decimal form is 1.5. Of in math is multiply. The cost at the supermarket's unknown, so we'll call that C. Just solve this little equation for C by dividing both sides by 1.5. Get C by itself. Now we just got to do this math right here. This says 5.40 divided by 1.5. With long division, you have to move the decimal so you have a whole number outside the division bar, and you have to move the decimal inside the division bar a corresponding number of times. So this becomes 54.0 divided by 15. 15 goes into 54 three times without going over. That's going to be 45. 54 minus 45 is 9. Bring our decimal into our answer. Drop down this 0 placeholder. 15 times 6 is exactly 90. 90 minus 90 is 0. So the answer to this one is D, $3.60. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're going to make use of the distance formula. D equals RT. We know he has to cover 12 miles. He's walking at a rate of 2.5 miles per hour. We're solving for T. Divide both sides by 2.5 to get T by itself. This crosses out, leaving you with T on this side. As you can see, T is 12 divided by 2.5. Decimal outside the division bar means shift the decimal one time here. Shift it a corresponding number of times here. Add a 0 placeholder. This becomes 120 divided by 25, which is very easy to do. 25 times 4 is 100. This becomes 20. 25 doesn't go into 20. We have to add a decimal and a 0 placeholder. Bring that decimal in the answer. Drop that down. 25 times 8 is exactly 200 with no remainder. So T in this case is 4.8 hours, which is answer choice D. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: if a cyclist travels an average of 24 miles per day, how many days will it take the cyclist to travel 600 miles? So this one's just going to involve some long division. Notably, we're going to do 600 divided by 24. And at first glance, you're probably saying to yourself, that's going to take a lot of time to do. That said, you should recognize that both 600 and 24 have a common factor of 6. 600 divided by 6, of course, is 100. 24 divided by 6 is 4. You should know that 100 divided by 4 is 25. So the answer to this one is D. It will take the cyclist 25 days to travel 600 miles if they travel an average of 24 miles per day. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: a plane is flying at an altitude of 9,000 feet above sea level. If it descends at a rate of 1,000 feet per minute and lands on a runway that is 1,000 feet above sea level, how long will it take to land? All right, so first and foremost, we have to figure out how much distance, vertical distance, this plane is going to travel. It's at 9,000, it's going to 1,000. 9,000 minus 1,000 is 8,000. So it's going to traverse 8,000 feet vertically. And according to the problem, we know it descends at a rate of 1,000 feet per minute. To figure out how long it's going to take to land, we just do 8,000 divided by 1,000. Again, you could just cross out these corresponding zeros. 8 divided by 1 is 8. So we know it's going to take this plane B 8 minutes to land. There's nothing more to this one. This practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: 12 is 60% of what number? So let's start by writing an equation that we can then use to solve this one. 12 in math is equal. 60% is the same thing as 6 over 10 as a fraction. Of in math is multiply, so this is times. What number is unknown, so we'll call that letter variable n. This says 12 equals 6 over 10 n. Now you can see that by solving for n, we'll know what our answer is. The first thing we want to do is get rid of this 6 over 10 in front of our n. To do that, we're going to multiply both sides of this equation by its reciprocal, notably 10 over 6. In doing so, this crosses out there and there, leaving us with n. And this math is actually very easy to do. 6 goes into 6 one time, 6 goes into 12 two times. This is 10 times 2, which is 20. So the correct answer to this one is B, 20. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT in 60 seconds. It says 12 is 25% of what number? So let's start by converting this to an equation that we can solve. It says 12 in math is always equal. So this is 12 equals 25% in decimal form is 0.25. Of in math is multiply. So this is multiply. What number is unknown? So we can represent that with the letter variable n. Let's clean this up a little bit. This becomes 12 equals 0.25 n. By solving for n, we'll have our answer. That said, let's make this a little bit easier. Again, the fraction equivalent of 0.25 is 1/4. So let's go ahead and plug that in. This becomes 12 equals 1/4 n. Let's solve for n now. To get rid of this 1/4 in front of n, we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of 1/4, which is 4 over 1. This crosses out, leaving us with just n on this side. 4 over 1 is just 4. So this is 12 times 4, which is 48. So the correct answer to this one is A, 48. This ASVAB practice test question says this: 4% of what number is 15? Just translate into equation and solve. 4% decimal form is 0.04. Of is multiply. What number is unknown? So call that n. Is equal 15. All right, let's work this out. This is 0.04n equals 15. By solving for n, we'll have our answer. So we're going to divide both sides by 0.04. As you can see, n is 15 divided by 0.04 like this. You can't do division with the decimal on the outside, so shift its decimal. Shift this one 2 times and add placeholders. This becomes 1,500 divided by 4. 4 times 3 is 12. 15 minus 12 is 3. Drop down to 0. 4 times 7 is 28. 30 minus 28 is 2. Drop down our 0. 4 times 5 is 20. No remainder. So our answer is, of course, 375, which is C. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says on Monday the water was shut off 3 times for a quarter of an hour, 2/3 of an hour, and 2 3/4 hours, respectively. How long in total was the water turned off? So to solve this one, we have to add all these together. The easiest way to do this one is to start by adding 1/4 and 2 3/4. Again, 1/4 and 3/4 is just one. And if you can't see that, do it off to the side. 3/4 plus 1/4 becomes 4 over 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. All right, so 1/4 and 2 3/4 becomes 3 plus 2/3. Now we could just add these like so. This becomes 3 and 2/3. So to answer this question, the water was turned off C, 3 and 2/3 hours in total. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're going to use the simple interest formula. Interest is equal to the principal, the amount you invest, times the rate times time. Of course, we're given interest in this case. We want to earn $750 in interest. Our principal, or the amount we invest, was $2,500. Our rate is 6%, which is 0.06 in decimal form. We're going to be solving for t. So the first thing we have to do is 2,500 times 0.06. Again, move this decimal 2 times to the right to make this 2,500 times 6. Once we do this, we'll move our decimals back over. This is 0, 0, 30, carry a 3, 12, 13, 15. Move our 2 decimals back in. So this becomes 150t equals 750. To solve for t, or time, we're going to divide both sides by 150 now. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with t. Cross out these corresponding zeros. 75 divided by 15, well, that's 15, 30, 45, 60, 75. So in other words, it's going to take D 5 years to get this amount of interest. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB is a combined rates problem. So we're going to solve it like this: T over A plus T over B equals 1, where A and B are the amount of time it takes each of the pipes to complete the task by itself. So this becomes T over 4 plus T over 6 equals 1. We have to write these with a common denominator of 12. 4 goes into 12 3 times, so this is 3t. 6 goes into 12 2 times, so this is 2t. This becomes 5t over 12 equals 1. Multiply both sides by 12. This crosses out, leaving you with 5t equals 12. Divide both sides by 5 now. So we can see that t is 12 over 5, which is the same thing as 2. Again, 5 times 2 is 10. You have a remainder of 2 over 5 left. In other words, it would take these two pipes working together 2 2/5 hours to fill the tank. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, it says that postage costs 22 cents for the first ounce and 17 cents for each additional ounce. What is the cost of postage for a letter weighing 3 ounces? So again, it costs 22 cents for the first ounce. We have a package that weighs 3 ounces, so it's going to be 17.17. Again, first ounce, second ounce, third ounce. All we have to do is add this up. 7 and 7 is 14, 15, 16. Carry a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to cost 56 cents, which is B, to mail this letter. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, trying to find the area of the triangle XYZ, which is enclosed by an 8 by 8 square. Since we're talking about finding the area of the triangles, we're always going to use the formula area equals 1/2 base times height. You have to know that one. Of course, we don't know the height of this triangle. That said, if we drop a line straight down from the peak of it to the base, we'll have two right triangles, the height of which is obviously 8, as you can see. Likewise, you should see that we split this bottom side of this square directly in half. So this is 4 and this is 4. So instead of finding the area of this one big triangle, we're actually going to find the area of these two small right triangles. So that's going to be 2, since there are two right triangles, 1/2. The base is right here, it's 4. The height is right here, it's 8. So by doing this math, we'll know our answer. 2 times 1/2 is just 1. So this becomes 1 times 4 times 8 is 32. So the area of this bigger right, this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says tiling costs $2 per square foot. What is the cost to tile a kitchen whose dimensions are 4 by 5 yards? First thing I want to point out is that we're given in dimensions in terms of yards and a cost in terms of square feet. So we have to make a conversion. First, let's find the area of this kitchen in terms of feet. Again, there are 3 feet in every yard. So this is 4 by 3, 12 feet by 5 times 3, which is 15 feet. This mental math is very easy to do. 10 times 15 would be 150. 2 times 15 would be 30. So this is 180. Now we do 180 times 2. Again, it costs $2 per square feet. Our square foot, we have 180 square feet. This is 0, 16, carry a 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So it's going to cost D $360 to tile this kitchen. That is 4 yards by 5 yards if tile costs $2 per square foot. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're going to translate this word problem into an equation that we can then solve. We're told that the first farmer paid $9,600 for his share of the truck, and that's equal to 4/5 of the total price of the truck. Again, of is multiply, and P is going to be the total price of the truck. Multiply both sides by 5/4 so we could get P by itself. This crosses out here and here, leaving you with just P on this side. Let's write this as a fraction by placing it over 1 so we can cross reduce. 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into 96 24 times. So this becomes 5/1, which is just 5 times 2400. By doing this math, we'll know the total price of our truck. This is 0, 0, 20. So bring down a 0, carry a 2. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. So the total price of this truck was B, $12,000. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says a rectangular gas tank is filled at a rate of 320 cubic inches per minute. The tank is 10 inches long, 8 inches wide, and 12 inches high. How many minutes will it take to fill the tank? So the first thing we have to do is find the volume of the gas tank. It's going to be length times width times height. We know those values. That's 10, 8, and 12. This is 10. 8 times 12 is 96. You have to know your times tables. This is 960. It's being filled up at a rate of 320 cubic inches per minute. So we're going to do 960 divided by 320 to figure out how long it's going to take. Cross out these corresponding zeros. 96 divided by 32 is 3. So it's going to take A, 3 minutes to fill up this tank. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says a child is 2.5 feet tall. Child's mother is twice as tall as the child. How tall is the child's mother? So since this is an easy question, I'm going to solve it 3 ways. So first of all, you should be able to solve this one mentally. 2.5 times 2 is going to be 5 feet tall. That said, if it's test day and you're a little bit nervous, you could do 2.5 times 2. Move our decimal 1 time to the right. This becomes 25 times 2, albeit with 1 decimal to remove. 5 times 2 is 10, carry a 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Bring that decimal back in, so we got our 5 feet that way. You could also do 2.5 times 2. Of course, this is going to require you to convert this to an improper fraction. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. So this is 5 over 2 times 2 over 1, which is 10 over 2 or 5. So no matter which way you decided to solve this one, you arrive at the same answer. And of course, all these methods take more or less the same amount of time. This question says a car salesman earns a monthly salary of $1,000 as well as commission of $250 for every car he sells. If he earned $2,500 in April, how many cars did he sell that month? So you have to realize that we can use a linear equation to model this relationship. Specifically, we could say this: he earned $2,500 in April. That's going to be equal to his base salary of $1,000 a month plus 250 times the number of cars he's sold, which we don't know. So we're going to use letter variable x to represent that. Let's solve this for x now. We have our linear equation here. This crosses out, leaving you a 250x over here. 2,500 minus 1,000 is 1,500, of course. Divide both sides by 250 now to get x by itself. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. Cross out these corresponding zeros. 150 divided by 25 is 6. In other words, he sold 6 cars in the month of April. This practice test question for the ASVAB says this: together, a husband and wife earn $125,000 per year. If one of them earns $25,000 more than the other, what is the amount of the smaller income? So we know that their incomes are unknown. I'm going to call one x. That means the other one is x plus 25,000. And we know together they earn 125,000. Let's go ahead and simplify this. This becomes 2x plus 25,000 equals 125,000. Clearly, by solving x, we'll know the amount of the smaller income, so subtract 25,000 from both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with 2x on this side. 125,000 minus 25,000 is going to be 100,000. Divide both sides by 2 now. You should know that 100,000 divided by 2 is going to be 50,000. So the smaller income in this relationship is $50,000. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, trying to figure out how long it will take him to repay a loan of $1,540 if he makes monthly payments of $55 each. So that's going to be $1,540 divided by 55. You can't avoid long division on this test, so get comfortable doing it. 55 goes into 154 2 times without going over. 50 times 2 is 100. 5 times 2 is 10, so I know this is 110. Subtract this out. 4 minus 0 is 4. 5 minus 1 is 4. 1 minus 1 is nothing. Bring down the 0. How many times does 55 go into 440? Use some logic here. Uh, 50 times 8 would be 400. 5 times 8 would be 40. 400 plus 40 is 440. 440 minus 440 is 0. So the answer to this one is A. It will take him 28 months to repay that interest-free loan if he makes $55 payments each month. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: a security camera is designed to track movement by capturing images every second. If the camera took 30 pictures in 1 minute, what percentage of the time did it take pictures? So it takes pictures that are each a second long. It took 30 of them, so it took 30 seconds worth of images out of 1 minute, or 60 seconds in total. We can go ahead and find a percentage very easily by crossing out these corresponding zeros. We have 3 over 6. You should know that there's a common factor of 3 and 6, which means this reduces to 1/2. You should know that the decimal equivalent of 1/2 is 0.5, which is the same thing as 50%. So this one is C, 50%. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says this: one number is 5 less than another. Their sum is 19. Find the numbers. So you could solve this one of two ways. You could solve it by using your answer choices, or you could solve it algebraically. I'm going to do both in this video. Again, the numbers sum to 19, and one is 5 less than another. 6 plus 11 is not 19, so we know that doesn't work. 5 plus 14 is 19. 14 minus 5, however, is 9, not 5. 4 plus 15 is 19. 15 minus 5 is 10, not 4. So logically speaking, B is the correct answer choice. That said, let's solve it algebraically. We know we have one number x. The other number is 5 less than that. They both sum to 19. This becomes 2x minus 5 equals 19. This becomes 2x equals 24. x equals 12. Again, here's one of our numbers, that's 12. This is going to be 12 minus 5, which is 7. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this. If a package of corn chips weighs 1.2 ounces, what is the weight in ounces of 48 packages? So we're going to do 48 times 1.2. This is testing your ability to do multiplication involving a whole number and a decimal. So we're going to shift that decimal one place to the right to make this 48 times 12, albeit with one decimal to move back into the left at the end when we're done. 8 times 2 is 16, carry a 1. 4 times 2 is 8 plus 1 is 9. Add a 0 placeholder. 8 times 1 is 8. 4 times 1 is 4. Add these together now. 6, 17, carry a 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. Bring that decimal one place in. So you can see that this is 57.6, which is answer choice A. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're trying to double 6 and 2/3. I'm actually going to solve this one two ways. The first way is like this. I'm going to split this apart to be 6 times 2 and 2/3 times 2. 6 times 2 is 12, of course. 2/3 times 2, again, just place this over 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 1 is 3. 4 over 3 is 1 and 1/3. Add these two together. 12 plus 1 and 1/3 is 13 and 1/3. So the answer to this one is B. That's one way to solve it. The other way is to do it like this. We have 6 and 2/3. Convert this to an improper fraction. 6 times 3 is 18 plus 2 is 20 over 3. Double this improper fraction. This becomes 40 over 3. 13 times 3 is 39. So this is 13 and 1/3. So either way works. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says a pound of roast should cook for 20 minutes. At this rate, how long would a 5-pound roast take to cook? So this one's very simple. We're going to do 20 times 5 to figure out how many minutes we should cook this roast. 20 times 5 is 100, so we're going to cook it for 100 minutes. That said, that's not one of our answer choices, so we have to be able to convert this 100 minutes to be in terms of hours in minutes. Again, there are 60 minutes in every hour. So if we do 100 minus 60, that gives us a remainder of 40 minutes. In other words, it's going to take 1 hour and 40 minutes, or D, to cook this roast fully. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we're going to start by multiplying 7 and 1/3 by 2 and 1/2. To do that, we're going to have to write these as improper fractions. That's going to be 22 over 3 times 5 over 2. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. 3 times 2 is 6. 22 times 5 is 110. Now we're going to convert this back to mixed number. We're going to do that via long division. 6 goes into 11 one time without going over. 11 minus 6 is 5. Drop down this 0. 6 goes into 50 8 times without going over, given that 6 times 8 is 48. So we have a remainder of 2 here. So this becomes 18 and 2/6, which is the same thing as 18 and 1/3. Let's do the subtraction to get our answer. 18 and 1/3 minus 7 and 1/3 is 11. So he throws the ball C 11 yards farther. Fab PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question. It says our odds of rolling a specific number is 1 out of every 6 rolls. We want to know how many times someone has to roll a die to get 3 5s in total. And let's think about it this way. Let's say someone threw the die. They didn't get a 5, they didn't get a 5, they didn't get a 5, they got a 5, they didn't get a 5, they didn't get a 5. What does this represent? This represents that 1 out of every 6 rolls, they got that 5. All right, let's just repeat this 3 more times. Let's say they got a 5 right away. That means they did not get a 5 on the remaining 5 throws. Again, those odds, as you can see, are 1 out of 6, according to the odds that were given in the problem. And then let's say they threw it, didn't get a 5, didn't get a 5, didn't get a 5, got a 5, didn't get a 5. Again, they got a 5 1 out of 6 times. Well, how many times did they have to throw this die in total to get those 3 5s given these odds? That's 6, 12, 18 times. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question says the area of a rectangle is 144 inches squared. If the length of the rectangle is 16 inches, what is its width? So we're talking about the area of a rectangle. That formula is area equals length times width. We know the area in this case is 144. We know its length is 16, and we know we're going to be solving for width. To get W or width by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 16. In doing so, this crosses out. Again, to get W or width, we do 144 divided by 16. Right away, I know 10 and 12 is too big. Again, 16 times 10 would be 160, which is too big. So the answer is either 8 or 9. I'm going to do this off to the side. 16 times 9 is going to be 6 times 9 is 54, carry a 5. 9 times 1 is 9 plus 5 is 14. So 144 divided by 16 is 9. Correct answer is B, 9 inches. This arithmetic reasoning question says this: Megan's test scores are 175. She needs a test average of a 90 for an A in her class. What is the lowest she can score on her final test? So she wants an average of a 90, and so far she scored 100 as well as a 75. We're going to use an X to represent the unknown score on her final test, and we're going to divide that by 3. Now let's clear 3 from this denominator by multiplying it to both sides. This crosses out. What's 100 plus 75? That's 175. So this is 175 plus X over here. 90 times 3. Well, 9 times 3 is 227. So 90 times 3 is going to be 270. Subtract 175 from both sides. This crosses out, leaving us with X on this side. 0 minus 5 we can't do. We have to borrow. This becomes a 6. This becomes 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. 6 minus 7 we can't do. This becomes 1. This becomes 16. 16 minus 7 is 9. 1 minus 1 is nothing. So this is D, 95. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB PiCAT says this: how many 10-pound bags of oranges can be made from 1,200 oranges if each orange weighs a quarter of a pound? So we know we have 1,200 oranges, and each of those oranges weighs a quarter of a pound. So to figure out our total weight, we're going to do 1,200 times 1/4. Of course, we can write 1,200 as a fraction by placing it over 1, which is going to enable us to cross reduce. 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into 12 three times. This is 300 over 1, which is 300, times 1 over 1, which is just 1. 300 times 1 is just 300. So we have 300 pounds of oranges. How many 10-pound bags of oranges can we make from those 300 pounds? Well, that's going to be 300 divided by 10. Cross reduce the 0. 30 over 1 is just 30. So in other words, we're going to be able to make B, 30 10-pound bags of oranges from our 1,200 oranges. This question says a furniture store pays $1,800 per month to rent its retail space. This January, the building owner raised the rent by 4.5%. What is its new rent per month? So let's do 1,800 times 0.045, which is the decimal equivalent of 4.5%. Let's move this decimal 1, 2, 3 times to the right. So this becomes 1,800 times 45. Once I do this math, I'm going to move the decimals I moved to the right here. I'm going to move them back into the left. This is 5 times 0, 0, 5 times 0, 0. 8 times 5 is 40, so bring down a 0, carry a 4. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is 9. Bring a 0 placeholder. 4 times 0 is 0, 4 times 0 is 8 times 4 is 32, carry a 3. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. Let's add this. 0, 0, 0, 11, carry a 1, 8. Bring our 3 decimals back in. 1, 2, 3. So we can see that the rent increased $81. Of course, we have to add that to 1,800, which you should know is 1,881, which is B. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says a bag of potting soil is 1/4 peat moss and the rest is dirt. What part of the potting soil is dirt? So for this one, again, we have one bag of potting soil. We know that a quarter of it is peat moss. So if we subtract 1/4 from 1, we'll know what part of it is dirt. Again, I'm not going to work this out. You should be able to do this one mentally. 1 minus 1/4 is 3/4. That said, you have to know that 3/4 has the decimal equivalent of 0.75, which is the same thing as 75%. That's answer choice C. I know many of you could solve this one mentally, but if you need a visual image of this one, again, here's our bag of potting soil. We know that a quarter of it is peat moss. That means 3/4 of it is dirt. And of course, that all equals 1 for the whole bag. For this ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we're working with squares. Specifically, we're working with perimeter, which is 4s, 4 times the side length, and area, which is s squared, that is the side length squared. According to the problem, we know that Her current office has a perimeter of 44 feet. So in place of P there, we'll do 44 equals 4S. We can solve for S by dividing both sides by 4. This crosses out, leaving you with S on this side. 44 divided by 4 is 11. So now that we know what S is, we can plug it in here. This becomes 11 squared, which you should know is 121. The question is this: if her current office has an area of 121 square feet, what is double that? So you could do 121 times 2. That's 242. So her bigger office would have an area of 242 square feet. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says it takes 3 coffee cups to make 1 quart. If a coffee cup is a half filled, what part of a quart is in the coffee cup? So at first glance, you might think this is a conversion problem. It's not. A coffee cup is a non-standard unit of measurement. That said, we're going to use a ratio to solve this one. Again, we know that uh, 3 coffee cups correspond to 1 quart. We want to know how many quarts are in a half of a coffee cup. So that's going to be our ratio there. Cross multiply, this becomes 3x equals 1/2. Solve for x by dividing both sides by 3. This crosses out. Again, right here, we have 1/2 divided by 3. I could write 3 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Then we could use keep change flip. 1/2 times 1/3 equals 1/6. So to answer this question, B, 1/6 of a quart is in a half-filled coffee cup given this ratio. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're comparing 2 squares. So if it's helpful, you can go ahead and make a quick sketch. We're told specifically that their side lengths have a ratio of 3 to 1 or 1 to 3. So that means this could be 1, this could be 3. Well, you should know that in squares, all the sides are equal. So if this is 1, this is 1, this is 1, this is 1. If this is 3, this must be 3, this must be 3, and this must be 3. Now let's compare their perimeters. To find the perimeter of any uh, polygon, you simply add up all of its sides. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 3, 6, 9, 12. So they have a ratio, their perimeters have a ratio of 12 to 4. Of course, we could reduce that by a common factor of 4. This becomes 3 to 1. So the ratio of their perimeters is C, 3 to 1. This practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: on a map, 1 centimeter represents 4 miles. A distance of 10 miles would be how far apart on the map. So for this one, we're going to use a proportion to solve it. Notably, 1 centimeter corresponds to 4 miles. That's going to be equal to x, or unknown amount of centimeters, corresponding to 10 miles. You solve proportions using cross multiplication. You do 4 times x, which is 4x, 1 times 10, which is just 10. Divide both sides by 4 to get x by itself. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. If you can't do 10 divided by 4 mentally, you could always do it as long division. 10 divided by 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. Add a decimal. Drop down that 0 placeholder. 4 times 5 is 20 with no remainder. So x in this case is 2.5. In other words, the answer is C, 2.5 centimeters, corresponds to 10 miles. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says an auditorium that holds 350 people currently has 150 people seated in it. What part of the auditorium is full? So we know there are 150 people seated in an auditorium that holds 350 people. So all we have to do is reduce this fraction. First, cross out these corresponding zeros. This becomes 15 over 35. You should recognize that both 15 and 35 have a common factor of 5. So let's divide both of those by 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3, of course. 35 divided by 5 is 7. So to answer this question, 3/7 of the auditorium is full. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question. It says if a stereo cost $125 and went on sale for a 20% discount, what is its sale price? So sales price is always going to be the original price minus the discount amount times the original price. Original price we know is 125. The discount amount we know is 20%, which is the same thing as 0.2 in decimal form, which is the same thing as the fraction 1/5. Well, I know 125 divided by 5 is 25. So I'm actually going to use the fraction equivalent here of 1/5 times 125. Let's work this out. This becomes 125 minus 1/5 times 125. That's 125 divided by 5, which is 25. 125 minus 25 is going to be 100. So the sales price of this stereo is be $100. You could have used the decimal point 2 here and worked that out using decimal multiplication, but that would slow you down a little bit. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we're told that we have a pi, which I'm going to represent with a circle right here. We're told that pi is cut in half, creating halves, of course. Then it's cut in half again, creating quarters. Then those quarters are cut in half again, and in doing so, we create eighths. In other words, each of these slices represents 1/8 of the total pie. We want to know if two slices are eaten, or two pieces are eaten, what portion of the pie remains? Well, 8 out of 8 represents the total pie. 8 divided by 8 is 1. We eat two pieces, so that's going to be minus 2 over 8. This becomes 6 over 8. Divide a common factor of 2 out to reduce this. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that means 3/4 of the pie remains. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we're comparing the list price of an item, which is $400, with the cost of buying the same item using a payment plan. First things first, we're told that we have to put 25% of the list price down for a down payment. So we're going to do 1/4, which is the same thing as 25% times 400. Again, if you place 400 over 1, we can cross reduce this. 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into 400 100 times. This is 100 times 1, or just 100. So our down payment is $100. Next, we're told that we have 12 monthly payments of $30. So we'll multiply that out. That's 0.6003. That's going to be 360, of course. So in total, the payment plan is going to cost us 360 plus 100 are $460. Clearly, that is $60 more than the list price. Again, 460 minus 400 is C60. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: 5 people who work 8 hours per day can assemble 400 toys in a 5-day work week. What is the average number of toys assembled per hour per person? So we have 5 people, they work 8 hours a day, and they work 5 days a week. By doing 5 times 8 times 5, we'll figure out how many hours they're working per week combined. That's 5 times 8, which is 40. 40 times 5 is 200. So for a 5-day work week, they're all working 200 hours. For that entire week, they produce 400 toys. So if we do 400 divided by 200, this will tell us how many uh, toys they're making per hour per person. Cross out these corresponding zeros. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So in other words, each person makes an average of 2 toys per hour. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question says this: two angles A and B are supplementary. Angle A measures twice as much as angle B. Find the measures of the two angles. So first and foremost, we have to know that supplementary angles add to 180 degrees. In other words, we can say angle A plus angle B will have to equal 180. Let's deal with this second part of the question. It says angle A measures twice as much as angle B. Well, these angle measures are currently unknown. So I'm going to call angle B X. If A is twice as big, that's going to be 2X, and this is going to equal 180. 2X plus X is 3X. This equals 180. Divide both sides by 3 to get X by itself. This says X equals 18 divided by 3 is 6. Drop down that 0. Again, angle B is X, so I know that is 60. Angle A is 2X, so 2 times 60 is 120. So the correct answer to this one is 60, 120. This ASVAB PiCAT practice test question says this: the hypotenuse of a right triangle has a length of 14 units and a side that's 9 units long. Which equation can be used to find the length of the remaining side? So whenever you're talking about right triangles and hypotenuses in particular, you want to use the Pythagorean theorem, notably a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs of the right triangle and c is the hypotenuse. Thankfully enough, we were given the hypotenuse. We were told in this problem that that's 14. We also know that one of the legs is 9 units long, so that's going to be 9. The unknown value we can represent with an x like this, so that's going to be x squared. Again, we want to know which of these equations will work, so let's subtract 9 squared from both sides. That leaves us with x squared equals 14 squared minus 9 squared, and we can see that that is answer choice C. You have to know the Pythagorean theorem for the ASVAB. It will show up in multiple ways. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says you travel 800 miles during a 40-hour work week. If you spend two-fifths of your time traveling, how many hours do you not travel? So again, you spend two-fifths of your time traveling. That means you spend three-fifths of your time not traveling. If you couldn't do that mentally like I just did, you would do 5 over 5 minus 2 over 5 to get you 3 over 5. Now we have to figure out what three-fifths of a 40-hour work week is. So we're going to do three-fifths times 40. Of course, we can place 40 over a 1, which enables us to cross reduce this. 5 goes into 5 one time. 5 goes into 40 8 times. 3 over 1 is just 3. 8 over 1 is just 8. Again, 8 divided by 1 is 8. 3 times 8 is 24. So the correct answer to this one is A. You spend 24 hours of your 40-hour work week, which is three-fifths of your work week, not traveling. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says Mauro eats twice as many walnuts as Yolanda. If Yolanda eats 6 walnuts every day, how many walnuts does Mario eat in a week? So if Yolanda eats 6 walnuts every day, and there are 7 days in a week, she eats 7 times 6 walnuts in a week. 7 times 6 is 42. You have to know that from your times tables. Mario eats twice as many walnuts as her, so that's going to be 42 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So he eats 84 walnuts in a week. Answer choice D. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: one number is twice as large as another. Their sum is 39. Find the numbers. So you could solve this one algebraically. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. That said, using the answer choices, you can solve this one much more quickly and easily, in my opinion. We know one number is twice the other, and their sum is 39. Well, what's 15 times 2? That's 30. That does not meet the requirements set in this question, so it can't be correct. 14 times 2 is 28. That does not meet the requirements set in this question. 13 times 2 is 26, so this could possibly be one of our answers. 12 times 2 is 24. That does not meet our requirements. So the only logical answer is 13 and 26. Again, 13 times 2 is 26. 13 and 26 does in fact sum to 39. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question says a company announced that 40% of those enrolled in its training program will be sent to a new plant. If there are 60 people enrolled in the training program, how many will be sent to the new plant? So we got to figure out what 40% of 60 is. In other words, we're going to take 60, we're going to multiply it by zero point 0.4, which is the decimal equivalent of 40%. You could also multiply 60 by 2/5 if you like working with fractions. In this case, it makes much more sense just to do this simple math right here. Again, shift our decimal one time to the right. This becomes 60 times 4, albeit with one decimal to move back into the left when we're done. 0 times 4 is 0. 6 times 4 is 24. Move that decimal back in. So the answer is D. 24 people are going to be sent to the new plant. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: a hexahedral die is rolled 2 times. What is the probability of not rolling a 3 both times? So to answer this one, let's think about it this way. We have a 6-sided die, and only one of those faces is a 3. So that means we have 1/6 odds of rolling a 3, which means that our odds of not rolling a 3 is 5 over 6. All right. What's the odds of not rolling a 3 2 times in a row? That's going to be 5 over 6, the odds of not rolling a 3 once, times 5 over 6, the odds of not rolling a 3 again. And so we're just going to multiply these two fractions together to get our answer. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. In other words, the odds of not rolling a 3 2 times is 25 over 36D. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB PiCAT says this: the following colors of M&Ms are placed in a bowl: 4 yellow, 6 orange, 3 green, 5 blue, and 2 brown. If you close your eyes and randomly select one from the bowl, what is the probability of selecting an orange one? So this is going to be probability of selecting an orange M&M. It's going to be the number of orange M&Ms in the bowl, which is 6 according to this problem, divided by the total number of M&Ms in the bowl. So we have 4 yellow, 6 orange, 3 green, 5 blue, and 2 brown. This becomes 6 over 4 plus 6 is 10. 5 plus 3 is 8 plus 2 is 10. So 10 plus 10 is 20. We can reduce this by a common factor of 2, of course. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 20 divided by 2 is 10. You should know that 3/10 is the same thing as 30%. So the correct answer to this one is A. Your odds of picking an orange M&M is 30%. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question says this: the lengths of the sides of one triangle are 3/4 the lengths of the sides of a similar triangle. If a side of a larger triangle is 36 inches, how long is the corresponding side of the smaller triangle? In other words, we got to figure out what 3/4 of 36 inches is. So that's going to be 36 times 3 over 4. If you want to rewrite 36 as a fraction, you can place it over 1. Again, 36 divided by 1 is just 36. Now we can cross out corresponding values. 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 36 9 times. This is 9 over 1, or just 9, times 3 over 1, which is just 3. 3 times 9, I hope you would know, is C, 27 inches. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: the lengths of the sides of one triangle are 2/3 the lengths of the sides of a similar triangle. If a side of the larger triangle is 24 inches, how long is the corresponding side of the smaller triangle? So for this one, we're going to have to figure out what 2/3 of 24 inches is. In other words, we're going to do this 24 times 2/3. As you can see, we're multiplying a whole number by a fraction. To make this a little bit easier, let's rewrite 24 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Again, 24 divided by 1 is just 24. To make this math even easier, we can cross reduce. We can say 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 24 8 times. What do we have here? 8 over 1, 8 divided by 1 is just 8, times 2 over 1, 2 divided by 1 is just 2. 8 times 2 is 16, so we know our answer is B, 16 inches. For the ASVAB and PiCAT, you have to be able to work with fractions. There's no way around it. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB says this: a pizza was cut into 8 equal slices. A person who eats one half of one piece ate what fraction of the total pizza? So I know many of you could solve this one mentally. That said, I want to make a quick sketch in case you haven't worked with fractions in a long time. Again, this pizza is cut into 8 equal pieces. So that means each slice represents 1/8 of the total pizza. So we know that each slice is 1/8 of the total pizza. How do you figure out what 1/2 of 1/8 is? If you eat half a slice, you just take 1/8 and you multiply it by 1/2. Again, you're just multiplying fractions here, so you can multiply straight across. 1 times 1 is 1. 8 times 2 is 16. So if you eat 1/2 of one slice, that's 1/16 of the total pizza. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT in 60 seconds. It says if a box of bolts weighs 1 3/4 pounds, what is the weight of 12 boxes of bolts? So, of course, to figure this one out, we're going to do 1 3/4 times 12. As you can see, we're multiplying a mixed number by a whole number. In order to work this out, however, we want to convert both these to fractions. So let's start with 1 3/4. To do that, we're going to do 1 times 4, which is 4, plus 3, which is 7. So this is 7 over 4. To write 12 as a fraction, we simply place it over 1. Now we're multiplying two fractions, so we're just going to multiply straight across. This becomes 7 times 12 over 4 times 1. 7 times 12 is 84. You got to know your times tables for this test. 4 times 1 is 4. As it happens, this math is very easy to do. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So the correct answer to this one is A, 21 pounds. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if 35 of the 140 cars delivered to a dealership were blue, what percent of the cars were blue? So let's start by expressing this as a fraction. Again, 35 of the 140 cars delivered were blue. You should know that fractions can be converted to decimals and then expressed as percents pretty quickly. But let's start by reducing this fraction as much as possible. You should see that 140 and 35 have a common factor of 7. Specifically, 35 divided by 7 is 5. Likewise, 140 divided by 7 is 20. We could reduce this even more since these have a common factor of 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 20 divided by 5 is 4. You got to know that the decimal equivalent of 1/4 is 0.25, which is the same thing as 25%. So the answer to this one is C, 25%. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: the length of a rectangle is 3 times its width. If the perimeter of a rectangle is 48, what is its area? So we know its width is unknown. We know its length is 3 times that. That means that is x, and that is 3x accordingly. To find the perimeter, you simply add up all the sides. So this becomes x plus 3x plus x plus 3x. This becomes 48. The perimeter equals 8x. Divide both sides by 8, and we know that x equals 6. So we know that this is 6. That means this is 18. To find the area of a rectangle, you do length times width. This is going to become 6 times 18. 6 times 18 is going to be 108. So the area of this rectangle is a 108. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: how many feet of fence is needed to enclose a garden that is square and has an area of 225 square feet? So we're trying to find the perimeter of a square. You have to know that formula. It's 4s, but we're only given the area of a square. That's s squared. You have to know these two formulas like the back of your hand for this test. What's more, we know the area of our square garden is 225. So let's plug that in for a. This becomes 225 equals s squared. We just want s, so take the square root of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with just s on this side. You have to know some common square roots for the ASVAB. Square root of 100, for example, is 10. Square root of 225 is going to be 15. Now that we know what s is, we can plug it in right here. This becomes 4 times 15, which is 60. So we need 60 feet of fence D. Solve this ASVAB arithmetic reasoning practice test question in 60 seconds. It says if the perimeter of a square garden is 32 feet, what is its area? So first and foremost, we should realize that we're dealing with the perimeter and area of a square. So let's write those two formulas down real quick. Perimeter of a square is equal to P equals 4s, whereas the area formula says the area of a square is equal to s squared, where s, of course, refers to the side length of a square. All right, so what else are we given? We're told that the perimeter is 32 feet. So in place of P, let's go ahead and plug in 32. This becomes 32 equals 4s. Let's solve for s by dividing both sides by 4. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving us with s on this side. 32 divided by 4 is 8. So now we know that s equals 8. Let's go ahead and plug it in right here. This becomes area equals 8 squared. 8 squared, of course, is 64. So the answer to this one is C, 64. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says Jerry walked the dog from 6:40 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. one day. If he was paid at the rate of $6 per hour, how much did he earn that day? So first we have to figure out how long he worked for. He worked walking the dog from 6:40 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. That's 50 minutes out of 60 minutes. In other words, if we cross out those corresponding zeros, he worked for 5/6 of an hour. We know he gets paid $6 an hour. So if we multiply this by 6, we'll figure out how much he made that day. This is very easy to do. Place 6 over 1 to make it a fraction. Cross out these corresponding 6's. Again, 6 goes in a 6 one time, 6 goes in a 6 one time. This is 5 over 1, or just 5, times 1 over 1, which is just 1. So in other words, he made 5 times 1, or B, $5 to walk the dog that day. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says, what is the length of the diagonal of a rectangle that has a length of 4 and a height of 3? So let's quickly make a sketch so we can understand what we're doing here. We're trying to find the length of the diagonal of this rectangle, and we know our rectangle has a length of 4 and a height of 3. Of course, when you split a rectangle in half like that, you create a right triangle, and this diagonal is actually the hypotenuse of a right triangle. So we can use the Pythagorean theorem to solve this one. Notably, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A and b are the legs, so a is going to be 4, b is going to be 3, and c is going to be our hypotenuse. Let's plug those in. This becomes 4 squared plus 3 squared equals c squared. This becomes 16 plus 9 equals c squared. This is 25 equals c squared. Take the square root of both sides to get c by itself. Square root of 25 is 5, so we know our hypotenuse is 5. Therefore, the length of diagonal is B5. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says which equation can be used to find the length of the remaining side. We have a right triangle, of course, and one of the sides is missing. Therefore, we're going to make use of the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A and b are the legs, and c is the hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. So I know c is 12. I'm going to let a equal 6, and finally that means b is going to be x. Let's plug these values in. This becomes 6 squared plus x squared equals 12 squared. Again, we want to find x, the remaining side. So we're going to subtract 6 squared from both sides like this. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving us with x squared equals 12 squared minus 6 squared. And as you can see, that is answer choice A. That will get us the remaining side length if we kept working that out.